Hi guys, welcome to our period 2 review, first video in this series. I'd like to preface this by saying in class, before we left for break, you guys were all like, "Oh, Dr. Stevenson, you should wear costumes." And you said that like you thought I wouldn't. And what you don't know is that I have a closet full of this stuff and absolutely no shame. So here I sit in my colonial garb wearing stays for the first time in 2 years. To be frank with you, I can't breathe right now. So we're going to go ahead and get started with this video and see how far we can get before I actually pass out and fall off this chair, which will be amusing in its own right. So for this particular video, we're going to be focusing in on settlement of the New World, which is what Unit 2 covers. And I've actually broken this unit up into more than one video because I feel like it would be really long if it was one video, and I don't think you guys are going to particularly enjoy a super long video. So I'm going to break this unit up into 3 videos. And our first one is going to deal with settlement of the Chesapeake and New England. And then in our next one, we'll head over and take a look at the restoration colonies. And then the final video will be taking a look at sort of the culture of British North America. So we talked about in class how the Spanish settle in North America. We talked about how the French settle in North America. But because this is a US history class, we are primarily concerned with those 13 colonies that become the United States. And so this unit really deals with how we get these colonies, where they come from, what their backgrounds are, and how we get sort of a culture that sets us up for a revolution, which is covered in Unit 3 of the AP material. Now, again, we talked about the fact that initially Spain claims all of North and South America. We talked about the fact that Spain doesn't actually make a lot of good life choices when it comes to dealing with their finances. They fight a lot of frivolous wars, and that leads Spain to decline in power. And that opens up settlement for other countries to get in and snag bits of it. Now, the English, they don't get into this game particularly early. They actually get into it kind of late. And part of that is when other countries are out there snagging their bits of North and South America, England's ruled by this guy, Henry VIII. Henry VIII is a man with problems. His biggest problem is that this woman, his wife, the Spanish princess Catherine of Aragon, has failed to produce a male heir. They've been married for 17 years, and she's only ever given him a daughter. Up until this point, England has not been ruled by a woman. And so English people are naturally apprehensive about where this is going. Henry VIII will eventually seek a divorce from her and go on a quest for a male heir, a quest that will have him going through quite a lot of wives to get what he wants. Some of these women will be divorced, some of these women will be beheaded. England will change its religion from Catholicism to a Protestant faith, Anglicanism. As you can imagine, this causes quite a bit of unrest in England. So much so that England isn't really paying attention to what's going on in North America. They're really paying more attention to what their crazy monarch's doing and who's going to lose their head next, because Henry was none too stable by the end. And when Henry dies, he does eventually get that male heir, young Edward. Edward's kind of sickly, and he dies only a few years after his father, leaving England to be ruled by a woman. First, his sister Mary, who wrenches the country back to Catholicism before dying childless and leaving the throne to her younger sister, Elizabeth. It's actually under the reign of Elizabeth that England sort of stabilizes and is able to begin looking at the rest of the world. It's beginning to look beyond its own borders. And Elizabeth actually decides she wants a colony in North America. She's going to commission a childhood friend, Sir Walter Raleigh, to go out and do this for her. Now, if you happen to see a question on the AP exam that says, "What was the first permanent British settlement in North America?" you guys better not say Roanoke. Roanoke is indeed England's first attempt to settle a colony. This is where Raleigh goes with his group of settlers. But remember, this colony doesn't take, it disappears. Actually, disappears more than once. But the big disappearance, the one you guys always think about, is the one in which England dropped some settlers there, fought a war with Spain, and then one day was like, wait, didn't we leave some people in North America? We should probably go check on those people. Wonder what they're doing. They're gone. To this day, we don't really know, although there are literally hundreds of theories, what actually happened to the people of Roanoke. But as you can imagine, the disappearance of the Roanoke settlers does tend to put people off the whole idea of settling in North America. I mean, nobody wants to go somewhere where they could just like vanish without a trace. Just it's bad marketing. So England doesn't attempt any more settlements for a while. And when they do again, they're going to kind of change the way that they think about settling. And so in England, after this point, when we start talking about settlement, we're going to talk about colonies that are really built around three different types. Some of these colonies are what are known as joint stock companies. So a company has been founded with the idea of placing settlers in a colony. And people invest in that company with the idea that these settlers will turn some sort of a profit either through something they're going to produce, and these investors will get their money back and they will make some profit on the side. Colonies are what we call proprietary colonies. These are colonies that have been given to a private individual to sort of do with as they please. And finally, there are royal colonies. These are the colonies that belong directly to the King or Queen of England and is administered by them and Parliament. It is important to note that while the 13 colonies of America start off some as joint stock companies, some as proprietary colonies, they all end up being royal colonies by the time of the Revolution. So none of these proprietorships or joint stock companies last particularly long. All the colonies eventually become royal colonies. So that's an important thing to keep in mind as we move forward. Now, I said again, England kind of loses its taste for making new and exciting colonies up until the early 1600s. 1607, they're going to try again. We get a joint stock company that forms, the Virginia Company. This company forms with the idea of putting a colony in what we today call Virginia, and they believe that this colony is going to find gold because the Spanish found gold in the New World and silver. Why shouldn't the English? The problem with this is there are no actual gold deposits in this region, but they don't know that at this time. They don't know that at all. So they send a group of people over to claim some land and hunt for gold. Now, the people they pick for settlers aren't necessarily ideal. They choose a lot of young, unmarried men, but many of these people have no real, what we would call life skills. They don't know trades. They don't know farming. They don't know how to grow food, build houses, all things that you need if you're moving to an area that does not have that kind of structure. So they send these people over, and it's sort of a dumpster fire. About more than half of these settlers actually end up starving to death because they spend all their time hunting gold instead of food. What is going to end up stabilizing Virginia is a product, but not gold. Um, Virginians are going to discover that they can grow a plant there, a plant that Europeans have developed a taste for since it was introduced by the Spanish, and that plant is tobacco. Europeans get quickly hooked on tobacco. Native Americans typically used this herb as a part of religious rituals. Europeans are going to use it recreationally, smoking it in pipes. They believed it was healthy, that it was a stimulant that could improve your health. There were even some people who believed it could wake the dead. It could, in fact, not wake the dead. And today we know that smoking tobacco is actually quite harmful for your health. But at that time, it was believed to be a healthy substance and something that Europeans highly desired. And so the ability of Virginians, people living around Jamestown, to farm this crop as a cash crop greatly stabilizes the colony. Now, it does mean that their economy is practically built on a single commodity, the production of tobacco, which in the long run has some issues as we move closer to the time of the revolution. But for the early settlement period, this helps Virginia. Unfortunately, it does not help the Virginia Company. They bankrupt. And very early on, Virginia becomes a royal colony, a colony under the direct rule of the King of England. Now, Virginia sits in what we today call the Chesapeake. It is not the only colony founded in the Chesapeake during this period. Just above Virginia, we have the founding of Maryland. Maryland is very different. It was not founded by a company. It is what we call a proprietary colony. So this was land given to a private individual. In this case, the private individual in question was a guy named John Calvert, also known as Lord Baltimore. Lord Baltimore was a favorite of the king. Unfortunately, he belonged to a religious sect that the English were not too fond of. Calvert was a Catholic, and Catholics were not well received in Protestant England. And he knows that he is privileged, he is a peer of the realm. He has privileges that average Catholics don't. And so he asks the king to give him some land in North America in which he can create a place where English Catholics can go and can live in freedom and peace. And so he founds the colony of Maryland. Now, Maryland only ends up being a safe haven for Catholics for a very short amount of time before it is fully invaded by Protestants who completely undo everything Calvert was trying to do. And eventually this colony too, because it becomes such a headache for the Baltimore family, they turn it back over to the crown as well. But this is a different type of colony being set up in the New World. A few years after the settlement of these areas, we're also going to have settlement in what is today New England. Now, somewhere along the lane of time, as you were learning about the first Thanksgiving, you were probably taught about the Puritans, the Pilgrims who came to the New World in search of religious freedom. Yes and no. That's actually an extreme oversimplification of what was happening here. The people who settled Plymouth and then Massachusetts Bay are searching for religious freedom in a sense. They do belong to a less popular sect of Protestantism. They are Calvinist Puritans. And those that came to Plymouth are actually separatist. They believe all the same things as the Puritans. Where these two groups disagree on is what to do with the Church of England. The Church of England is the state church, the state religion of England. It is, in the minds of many Puritans and separatists, a little too Catholic-y. There's a little bit too much Catholic stuff going on. And so they want to purify the church of those Catholic elements. That's why they are known as Puritans. Now, the Puritans believe that they can fix the church. The separatists believe that it's time to break away and found a completely new denomination of Christianity. And it's actually the separatists who we think of as the Pilgrims. The separatists are going to embark first, and they are going to found Plymouth. And you all know the story of that. And then they're followed a few years later by a group of Puritans who form Massachusetts Bay. Eventually, these two colonies will join forces and become the colony of Massachusetts. Now, they do come for the right to practice their religion freely, but they don't believe in religious freedom. They don't believe in religious toleration. Puritans believe that they are the only people who are correct. And they spent a great deal of time mercilessly persecuting other sects of Christians, horribly persecuting other sects of Christians. So if you're writing an essay about this and you want to distinguish yourself as someone who really understands this content material, don't just stop with saying they were seeking religious freedom. Qualify that by saying they were seeking religious freedom for themselves. They don't believe in religious toleration at all. They heavily persecute people who are not like them. They even persecute members of their own church who don't buy in to all of the Puritan theology. And this is how we end up with all these tiny New England states, because New Hampshire, Maine, Connecticut, Rhode Island, all of those are going to break off from Massachusetts. Some of them break off because they're too far away from the main government in Boston. Others, like Rhode Island, break off because The leader of Rhode Island Roger Williams could not agree with the leaders of the Puritan church as to how Native Americans were supposed to be treated. And so he leaves and founds his own colony. Um, so again, keep in mind when we're dealing with the Puritans of New England, they're not a very tolerant people, and that's one of the reasons they're leaving England. They were highly intolerant in England. They also had a lot of other views that made them unpopular. They tended to be extremely conservatively religious and to believe things like going to the theater, wearing fancy clothing, wearing makeup if you were a woman, doing literally anything other than reading your Bible was wrong and should be banned by the government. And so when they come to New England, they actually set up what is essentially a theocracy. The church rules the government, and they ban a wide range of activities, things like dancing, theaters, pretty much anything you can imagine that would be fun, they didn't allow, which makes it kind of dry up there. Now, they do believe in making money, though. Lots of money. They believe that being wealthy is a mark of divine favor. So they're actually going to become much more quickly. Now, some of that has to do with the people they brought. The Puritans come as family units, and most of these people had a trade. They were farmers, or they had some other sort of useful trade, or they knew about trading between countries. And literally large groups of them come to this area. So this area stabilizes way faster because these people have the life skills to build a colony in the middle of nowhere. They are also going to turn a profit faster, and their economies are going to be much more diverse, focusing not just on farming, shipping, and trade, both with the Native Americans and with Europe. Now, one place where you might see a essay question coming out of this, what tends to make for a really good essay question is something asking you to compare the Chesapeake colonies with the New England colonies. And in your review package, you have a gigantic chart. I would encourage you to go through that chart at length, learn the differences between these two, because it is quite likely you could see some form of free response question asking you to compare these two. It's a very easy free response question to write, and actually an easy one to answer if you know what you're looking for. So some big things to remember as far as differences between these two or similarities is their reason for settlement. Virginia is founded to find gold, make money. But you can qualify that by saying that Maryland is founded to provide a safe haven for people of the Catholic faith. New England is founded by Puritan Christians who are seeking a place to practice their faith and the persecution of other sects freely. So if you were comparing them, you would say, well, New England and Virginia are actually quite different, but the idea behind the founding of Maryland and New England are perhaps not that different. There's also a difference in the types of settlers. Most of the people coming to the Chesapeake are going to be young, unmarried men. Natural population growth does not happen easily in the Chesapeake area. It's young, unmarried men coming to make their fortune and then return to England. But in New England, it's family units, mothers, fathers, and their children going together with the intention of remaining in the New World permanently. These people have no intention of going back to England at any point. And their economies are also quite different. Maryland will also focus heavily on the production of tobacco. So when we talk about the Chesapeake region, Virginia and Maryland, we're talking about plantation agriculture very early, based around a single cash crop, tobacco. But for New England, we have a much more diverse, an economy that's based on farming and on trade, both again with Native Americans and with Europe itself. And again, I refer you back to your gigantic review packet where you guys have a much bigger chart that helps you compare these two. But this is something, if you're focusing in on something you want to really study for this unit, a free response question asking you to compare these two would not be outside the realm of possibilities and would definitely be something that you should focus on within this. So that gets us through the founding of our first sets of colonies. Our next video is going to look a little bit more on a group of colonies we call the Restoration colonies, and we'll found that 13th colony, Georgia. So I will see you guys in a bit.